exponentially more value to digital customers. So the question again is, how can we adapt to pace as Africans, as startups in Africa, as business owners, even the governments? How can we adapt to pace? Now, with many sectors just starting out on this journey, how do we overcome the encumbrances posed by our legal systems, infrastructure deficit, and business models that will enable us to meet heightened customer expectations and the demands of a changing market? Now, we all know that startups in Africa are struggling to find the resources, the expertise, and the support they need to launch, to grow, and to scale their offerings. So how do we overcome these challenges? A number of how, and how, and how. But we have that will look into this matter and give us the hows that we are looking at today. And these are great guys, great people that have been doing incredible things across the continent. And they will be looking at their areas of expertise where they have experiences and where they have solutions to offer. On the panel today, we have Salvatore Kesi, who is from Tanzania. Salvatore is a tutorial assistant in the Department of Maths at the University of Dar es Salaam. He is also the founder and CEO of Smart Class Tanzania, with more than 5 years of experience in education and financial sector. We also have Sakilo Sitho from Eswatini. Beta has over 5 years of experience in entrepreneurship, business, and public relations. Currently, Beta is the director of Startup Grind in Bandene and Startup Grind Eswatini, with a focus on nurturing startup ecosystems through events, workshops, media, and partnerships. She also facilitates school youth. She facilitates workshops and covers school youth and women in business. Beta studied public relations at Lincoln University in Eswatini. Beta, you are welcome. We also have on the panel Kudzai Zikomboreri Kutukwa from South Africa. Kudzai is the co-founder and CEO of Mobi Insurance. Mobi Insurance is a startup that develops mobile-based crop insurance products and other financial. Also co-founded the Emerging Farmers Exchange, a marketplace that links large buyers of agricultural produce with smallholder farmers who are currently excluded from the value chain. Kudzai utilizes imagery to conduct market analysis and help reduce costs for farmers. In 2017, Kudzai was recognized by the Fast Company magazine as one of South Africa's top 20 young entrepreneurs under 30. This program is powered by the Mozambique Academy of Research and Sustainable Development, this academy is led by Eduardo Sigapo. And Eduardo also has an incredible profile. If you check him out on Facebook and Instagram, you understand what we're talking about. But right now, let's go into the discussion. And I'm going to be inviting the panelists, possibly beginning from Salvatore, possibly beginning from you, if you are there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's quickly look at the landscape of innovation and startups in your country, and also look at how the government comes in what is the landscape like? How has the government been of help? What is the government doing in this area?
Okay, thanks a lot, Agbo, for this opportunity to start. Yeah, so in Tanzania so far, as everywhere else in the world, the innovation is picking up, and we have seen a lot of innovation in different fields, include agriculture, financial sector, education, as well as other areas like insurance. And uh, a lot of this innovation are mainly from young people who are trying to build up the solution that solve the problems that people in Tanzania as well as Africa face every day. So in short, I can say like young people in Tanzania, they are very active and they have been contributing massively in building up solutions that they are tech-based to solve the ongoing challenges in different spaces in Tanzania. And most importantly, because of this current pandemic, people in Tanzania have realized the potential of technology, and a lot of them they are currently, I mean, taking it seriously than before because, for example, myself, I run an EduTech, which helps students to get the very best teachers around the country, and they can take their classes whenever they are. But before, people were not that active on taking online classes. But currently, because of this pandemic, parents as well as students, they are coming to us and they are taking classes online. So I can see the speed of development as well as the usage of tech-based solution in Tanzania and I guess across Africa is growing massively. And in terms of support, like the government, of course, is doing a great job. I mean, to uh, create a conducive environment that support the development of this technology. For example, government has been giving some funding support to startups. For example, ourselves, we are incubated by the government institution that give us support like office as well as coaching so that we can prosper in our uh, business. So the government has been doing a good job in that space, as well as the government has been also formulating some better rules that support startups. For example, one startup, for startup, it's really hard to have enough muscles at the very beginning to, for example, pay taxes and stuff like that. So government is also looking at that space by um, enacting some very friendly laws that support the growth of technology. But on top of that, also recently we have seen a lot of corporates, I mean the private sector also coming in and supporting the startup. And one good example has been Vodacom Tanzania, which recently, I mean this year started to support some of startups by like picking the best startups and investing in them. So this is also a good opportunity for startup ecosystem in Tanzania because it provides an opportunity for these startups to grow as fast as possible than they could have grown by their own. So in short, I can say the tech space in Tanzania is growing and I can see a bigger potential in next 5 years. And yeah, that's what we are looking for. So thanks. Hello.
I think we lost him. So I'll just pick up from there and also talk about, answer the same question with respect to South Africa.
Yeah.
So with regards to South Africa, what we have is a very, very competitive startup landscape, or rather innovation landscape, where you have a lot of companies that are coming up that are introducing a wide range of products, and at the same time, all of these companies they're incorporating technology as much as possible, especially from the perspective where we are at now with the COVID-19 pandemic that has sort of driven business to a halt across the country for the last couple of months. So what we are seeing is, or what I'm seeing basically is a huge, huge drive of innovation, particularly when it comes to digital adoption, where you, like what you mentioned with regards to education, where a lot of people were somewhat resistant to taking online classes or anything of that sort. But I guess the pandemic then made that kind of standard. In addition to that, a lot of services kind of moved online, for example, shopping. And it sort of then enabled even farmers and other people that normally would not consider having a website or marketing their products differently on digital platforms to also embrace those platforms and see how best they can actually utilize them to increase their sales and revenue during this time of where the pandemic was actually a big factor. With regards to the role of the government has done a lot to make innovation possible. So they have established innovation hubs across the country. These are basically places where they offer incubation services, including office workspaces, entrepreneurial training, and even market linkages to emerging and startup companies. Because one of the issues that a lot of startups face, even when they have things like access to capital, most of them, primarily in this country, they don't have access to a ready market to which they can actually sell their products and services. And so what the government was trying to do, or is actually trying to do, is to bridge the gap to enable like new startups and new companies that are coming up to be able to then access not only the resources that they require to grow the company, like your capital, human resources, technology, etc., but in addition also access to the market, where once they've produced whatever goods or services that they are looking to offer to the market, they have a ready buyer or someone that they can sell them to. So that's kind of the role that the government has been playing. In addition to that, the private sector has also stepped in to also ensure that they also get a piece of the action, even though from the private sector perspective, it's more of them trying to take advantage of companies that are within their industry or part of their value chain. So in our early days, as an example, we were supported primarily by Standard Bank um, by virtue of the fact that our product fit well with some of or within their own ecosystem. So these are like some of the initiatives that are coming from a governmental front as well as from the private sector to spur and encourage and improve innovation across the continent. Well, mostly South Africa, and to enable to position South African startups globally. Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Yeah, sorry, I lost connection. I got with Salvatore talked about innovation, the political sector, the education sector. I also got when he talked about government doing something about taxation. to encourage startups. I also got when you talked about investors bringing in some money to invest in these innovations. Now, but I'm sure I came in hearing Kudzai making his submission. So, Kudzai, are you done?
Yes, you came in when I just finished making my contribution.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have Beta in the house yet. Is Beta in the house? If she's yet to join us, I'll get back to you, Salvatore. You are doing quite a lot in the educational sector.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
so yeah, and our educational system has also, in a way, in Africa, affected our level of innovation and a lot of things that we do because we have this classroom education. A lot of times that our people are not able to apply. So, with the work you're doing, with your experience, what can you tell us? Has technology helped us in that area?
Yeah, so thanks a lot for this impressive question. And this is the question actually I used to ask myself even uh, way back when I was still young, like, how can I use this stuff? Like, sometime I used to do some maths at school and I used to ask, like, where do we apply these stuffs? But fortunately that I have been doing a lot of schooling and I have seen that a lot of these things, they are really, really very useful. So back to your question, yeah, we acknowledge that there is a gap between what students they are learning in school and what really the world wants, and that gap is the gap. Of course, we really trying our very best to fill it, but it's the gap that we cannot go that fast because the society and the government they are also taking some time to like change the way people learn uh, and even what they learn. So what we're doing, of course, for example, in our platform, we know that, for example, students that already have burden, I mean, like the stuff that they have to learn from school, the curricula that they have to cover. But on top of that, what we're doing is like we're providing opportunity for these students to be able to like take extra classes that they can help them like develop solutions to the problem that Africa and the world were facing. For example, one of the area that we provide help is we help kids to like get connected to like very experienced and qualified programmers to help them start learning coding at very early. And for example, this problem of like coding is a very big problem, especially in Tanzania, because one of the biggest problem that a lot of startups are facing right now, even us as a smart class, is lack of very good programmers. So this is a problem that myself I have been facing, and therefore through our platform we provide opportunity for kids to learn these stuffs. But again, once we are trying to push this to the young people, there are a couple of challenges that, of course, they can't make this happen as quick as the way we want. For example, kids, they don't have like devices like computers that can help them to like um, learn these stuffs. And on top of that, it's still also really hard to convince parents to like appreciate why should kids start learning all these stuffs, while at the same time these kids they are right like they're struggling to make sure that they pass their exams and continue with the high levels. So there is the challenges in terms of like how to balance the traditional curriculum as well as bringing in these other important skills that they are needed. But as smart class, what we're doing is we're trying to find a balance between these two set of skills, because we acknowledge that both of them they are very important, and kids and the young people they should learn them simultaneously so that they can be able to use this theory plus other skills that they learn from smart class to be able to develop a robust solution to the problems that we are facing every day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's quite understandable. Now, that's as it relates to education. But we also understand that agriculture is the mainstay of most of our economies. We forget that a lot of our countries have oil these days, but if you check the majority of the population, those in the rural areas, the poor, they mostly depend on agriculture. So coming to back to you, Kutsai,
Mm.
we have a lot of businesses in the agri sector coming up in Africa. Youth with a lot of ideas, innovative ideas, meaning we have a lot of startups in that sector. And a lot of countries are campaigning and encouraging their population to go back to agriculture. For example, in Nigeria, where we've depended on oil for a long time, there's a serious campaign for the young ones to go back to agriculture. Now, looking at it, what would you tell us is the role of technology? Because that's the work you have been involved in over time. How has technology helped us? Or how is it going to help the youths? Because most youths now are involved in technology one way or another. How can we integrate the two? The campaign to go back to agriculture, the technology-driven generation. How is technology going to help us in agriculture and food security?
Thank you for that question. So that is a multi-dimensional question, and I will break it down. Firstly, I'll start to answer the part where you were referring to agriculture, the core, where a lot of governments and even non-governmental organizations are encouraging the youth to think about agriculture. So let me give you a couple of statistics first. Africa has about 60% of the world's arable land, right?
Yeah.
But with all of that, we are still a net food importer as a continent. And we spend approximately between 40 to 60 billion US dollars importing food. So now the question then becomes, in light of that, what is the problem? Why is it that with the fertile soils that we have, with all the resources, the great weather and all of this, what is the reason for Africa being a net importer of food? So now when you begin to dig deeper, you begin to see that there are a couple of bottlenecks in the system or glitches that make it the whole process or the whole value chain inefficient. So for example, most of the food that is harvested in Africa, about 20 to 30% is lost after the harvest. So you're looking at your post-harvest losses and those kind of things, which could have been easily prevented had there been like infrastructure in such as storage infrastructure or good road networks that would ensure that most of this food or these crops that are produced can get to the market as quickly as possible. So that is factor number one. Factor number two, there is a disjointed value chain system, generally speaking, across Africa, from production to market. So a lot of, particularly if you're looking at your smallholder farmers, they are not 100% aware of what the market requires to produce. So you'll find someone growing tomatoes because, hey, everyone, my neighbor is growing tomatoes, or I'm growing potatoes or whatever because that's what my neighbor is doing. Then the net result of that is the market becomes flooded with tomatoes or potatoes, and that pushes the price down. So there's a gap between the farmer understanding what the market requires and what they end up producing. And that then has a negative impact on the ultimate income that they eventually get. One of the other gaps that you also have within this value chain system is the financial services like microcredit, microinsurance, and so on and so forth. Now, what that does is it inhibits a farmer's ability to grow and to invest in their farm, whether it's to invest in new machinery or in new varieties of seed, new breeds of livestock, etc., etc. So when you look at all of these different, and I could go on and on about these different gaps that exist within the market, but when you look at all of these, or most of these gaps and problems that are existing, these are issues that can easily be addressed with the introduction of technology. So for example, financial inclusion, or if you're looking at financial services like credit, like insurance, and so on, these are things by introducing digital financial services, you are able to offer the same services, for example, like savings or credit, at a much, much lower cost than currently is available by utilizing technology like machine learning, whereby you can have alternative credit scoring mechanisms, because that's a very big factor in order for someone to qualify for any sort of credit. You need to not only assess if this person is able to repay the loan, but if they have the capacity or the potential to actually utilize that loan effectively. So technology can then help make or do those kind of analysis where you can go beyond the traditional mechanisms that typically a normal financial institution would go to. And you can do it at a much, much cheaper rate, especially when you incorporate mobile technologies. Another interesting statistic is that on the African continent, we have more mobile phones than people. So that definitely is actually an opportunity for the infiltration of some of these financial services. When you look at it from a market linkage or a market access perspective, it then becomes, again, you piggybacking off of mobile and some of these other technologies that I mentioned, it becomes much and much easier to then send data and intelligence to farmers to actually say, there's an overproduction of tomatoes now. So if you're thinking of doing tomatoes, maybe it's not a good idea. And then guiding them across that process to say, if you're looking for potential other areas or other crops to farm, these are some of the areas or some of the crops that you can actually get into. So these are the areas in which now technology can then help to bridge these knowledge gaps, to bridge the gaps in terms of provision of services, and to also bridge the gap in terms of even market linkages so that the farmer knows that in as much as I have my bag of potatoes or mealie meal or whatever, and in this current, within my vicinity, this is how much I can sell it for. 200 or so kilometers away, someone else is willing to pay me XYZ price for it. So it's bringing information together and bridging all of these gaps that currently exist within the continent that can then help make agriculture not just profitable for the farmer, but also ensure that as a continent, we are food secure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. But just before you leave off that topic, you just mentioned that in Africa we have more mobile phones than more than people. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
now, now it means that okay, we also have more of our farmers who have access to mobile phones.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of these farmers are located in rural areas. And even in the cities, you can see how we battle with network. I just left off a while ago, that was network. And a lot of these are people in interior villages or communities where their farms are located,
Yes.
meaning that internet can be a problem. What's the solution? What are you looking at? What have you been working on? What do you advise? How do we bridge that gap so that our rural farmers can maximize technology through access to internet?
Great question. So with regards to bridging that gap, there are a couple of things that can be done. One of which is perhaps going low tech for some of the services that I'm mentioning or some of the issues that I'm mentioning. So this is coming up with services that can be delivered through USSD on basic feature phone. That'll then make it possible, say, to introduce some of these farmers in areas where perhaps connectivity or internet access is not as strong as it should be. That can then become like what I would call maybe step one, which is quite obvious from that perspective that if already you have a mobile phone, then it's a question of trying to look at saying, okay, fine, with the kind of mobile phone that you have, what can we do in terms of provision of services? So utilizing traditional SMS and all of that, that could be step one. Step two would involve also a level of investment and even innovation in, say, network towers or satellite internet that is geographically or that is specific to a certain geography, right? To where now within certain rural areas, internet access can then be beamed to allow a lot of these services to come online and to come up. Of course, these are not things that are, or it's not what I would call an inexpensive solution, but it's a more long-term solution to ensure the sustainability of some of these digital services and building up that digital infrastructure, particularly in those rural areas. This is also what I would call maybe another opportunity for other entrepreneurs to then come in to say, how then can we ensure connectivity in these areas where there isn't great internet access or access to great connectivity, on top of which all of these other different services can be built. So that's kind of how I would look at it as to what can actually be done. One, investment in digital infrastructure, other low-tech solutions like satellite internet, or even giving incentives to the current mobile phone operators to invest in rural areas, whether it's that probably would require an interaction or some sort of government support. But as entrepreneurs, there are also other ways that we can come in there. And the other that I mentioned, building solutions that can work on basic feature phones, as much as that, kind of a limited solution, but I think it would be a great start.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that response. Thank you very much. I don't know, do we have our colleague back? I don't know. Beta, are you with us? I don't can spot her. Okay, so we'll get back to you, Salvatore.
Yeah,
The COVID-19 hit everyone
yeah, sure.
like an unexpected tornado, and the education sector was not left out.
Sure.
Schools were shut down,
Lovely.
and you could see that a lot of our institutions were not prepared.
Yeah,
They were struggling to roll back online, start online lessons and online classes, but that couldn't work in a lot of places. And our people were left out of school and all that. Now, that is a challenge, but what opportunities does that challenge of COVID-19 hold in our education sector, especially for startups, for innovators, for people who are looking at opportunities that can come out of this? What opportunities are there? You might decide to point one or two impacts it had in our educational sector, but looking forward, going forward, what are the opportunities that can come up and how do we make sure that our educational sector is pandemic proof?
okay. Thanks a lot again for this impressive question. Yeah, sure. So I admit for sure, like this COVID has really affected pretty much everything in educational space. Myself, I'm also a student right now, and for this during this time, a lot of things has changed, and everything has moved from being face to face to online. And by the way, myself as a student, I find it like very impressive, like doing everything online, because you save a lot of time, and you just focus on like most important things. So you don't waste a lot of time like moving here to there. You don't. So in short, myself and the other students, they like this new way of teaching, pretty much the same for lectures. I mean, like the feedback has been like very very high, that a lot of people they prefer this sort of like learning instead of like doing the physical classes. So what I see for the future is like we're going to have a future which will be some sort of like hybrid model where like it will have both the online as well as the offline classes, because the only hardest part right now that I guess everybody thinking of is how do we maintain the engagement, the networking part that was is there. I mean, was there when we had like physical classes. Otherwise, if that part is sorted, then I don't see why we should be doing physical classes. Yeah, so what I can see in uh, next 5 to 20 years, I mean 10 years, is we are going to see some sort of like new model for learning that will comprise of both the online and offline. But again, for this, it will be more this hybrid model will probably work best for like developed countries where people, first of all, they have devices that can help them to do these classes. Because, for example, myself back home, where we run this online platform that helps students to take classes online, well, we have very impressive infrastructure where students they can take classes online, they can interact with teachers. But again, um, I receive a lot of calls about people they have no idea even how to log in, or people have no idea even how to like choose the browser to sign up and stuff like that. People they don't have emails, so you have to help someone to like create an email and sign up to the platform. So those are the challenges that they see. And another challenge which is there, as mentioned earlier by the other discussant, is the issue of the internet. So the internet is still a big challenge, and yeah, internet is there, but still not that strong enough to handle things like video classes. And a lot of students, of course, they are also coming from rural area, because I remember even myself, I was in a hard time. I was in a dilemma because like I have my young sister who, by the time COVID was very active back home, she was uh, she was in the village. So myself, my solution, I mean, my platform couldn't help her because like she can't reach, she can't no internet, no anything that can help her to like continue learning. So the only option, she could follow the classes via the TV program that was going on there. So uh, this new way of learning will still be hard for a lot of developing countries where students as well as teachers they still encounter these sort of problems, which range from the internet to devices, and even the expertise on how to use both the to use these technologies to learn. So as a startup and government plus private sectors, I guess we have a lot of work to do, from educating these teachers as well as students on how to use this infrastructure, as well as some other bigger roles like internet, that I guess is the role of government and the other big investors to fix it. But at least for the time being, we have seen a lot of big telco companies. They have been helping us. For example, a lot of age tech platform have been zero rated, that they can be accessed without the need of internet, and that has really helped a lot of students to like keep learning during this time of COVID. So in summary, what I can say is the EdTech Express is estimated to be to generate a revenue of more than 400 billion by 2025. So this has jumped from something which was estimated like 200 billion by 2022. So the EdTech space globally has grown unexpectedly because of this new push that has made people to realize the importance of using this technology when it comes to learning. So I can see the big future, and what we have to do, especially developing countries, we have to keep on preparing for this in terms of setting up proper infrastructure, educating our people on how to use these technologies, as well as for us who are on the development part of this product to also keep on brainstorming on how we can bring things like engagement that is missing currently in most of age tech products.
Thank you very much for that response. Now, you've pointed at some of the challenges we are having in our formal education. And we are talking about young people who are going to formal education. And earlier we looked at the challenges of technology, and apart from the issue of internet and the rest, uh, Kudzai has mentioned the need for investment in technology in the area of internet and all that. But investment is one thing. There is also the area of informal education. There are a lot of our people, like I mentioned before, farmers in rural areas who are not in the schools. And if those in formal education are finding things difficult, I wonder what they are going through. Now, is there a deliberate attempt, deliberate, calculated projects that are targeted at these people in the rural areas to give them a level of education in the area of technology, information technology, as it relates to their farms, it relates to their small scale businesses, relates to the little things they do in those areas? Because I think that apart from the intervention we have had during the COVID, like government sending palliatives, that part of the thing the government should do is bringing these ICT skills, basic skills, to these rural dwellers in case we have another pandemic in the future. Do you, in your country or your place of residence or anywhere in Africa, do you think that the government is doing enough in that area? And
Yeah,
where do you
so
think the private sector are coming?
okay, sure. So first of all, we have to admit that this is really a big problem. I mean, like this is one of the big challenge that probably we overlook it, the issue of knowledge on how to use this infrastructure. Because I have to tell you, just let's leave aside people who are living in the rural, people who are even living in urban area, they still have these issues. So you can imagine people like teachers who are probably degree graduates or even diploma graduates, they still have issues, very small issues. They can't log in, or they can't sign up, or they can't create the accounts very comfortably. So this issue of knowledge is a big deal. And so far, government, for example, back home in Tanzania, they are trying their very best to fix this gap. But as you know, government alone cannot solve this problem on time. They can solve it, but it can take some time to get fully solved. So I think, for example, us, what we are doing is we are trying our very best to at least give the basic skills to people, especially teachers who are using our platform, on how they can improve their ICT skills to kind of like be able to know even how to deliver classes online. So these are the things that we try to do. But as a nation, I guess what we need to do is to have more aggressive plans to make sure that people they really get these basic skills so that they can be able to embrace the technology. Because I can see like at the end of the day, everything want to be technological in next 5 years. So it's high time for both the government and non-government organizations to play their role in helping society to catch up with these technological skills. But at the end of the day, what I see is if we don't want to teach people about this technology, or we don't want to teach ourselves about this technology, then we're going to be forced to learn them, because at the end of the day, it's going to be the only way to do things. For example, maybe it's going to be the only way that we have to use to learn. Like myself here, for example, I'm forced to learn new technologies every day, because that's the only way I have, for example, to learn or to do my work. So yeah, so I guess we have to try our best to educate these people, and otherwise the environment or the circumstances will force us to learn these things, and be able to adapt, because that's the future that I see. And also what I see is a lot of companies back home in Tanzania, they are they are changing very fast to technological based company. And this means that a lot of services will be accessed from this company, given that you can be able to use these technologies. So I think it's very, very important to make sure that people they really get these skills. And how people will get these skills will come from government, from non-government organizations, plus people themselves willing to learn these skills.
Thank you very much for that response. I think
Yeah,
it's an area where we need to look into very seriously. And I think
yeah,
that as much as it's a problem, it's also an opportunity for the upwardly mobile young Africans. Because thinking about how you can package um, a program to close that knowledge gap can also be a business idea. It can also be a social enterprise, but also a business idea. Now, I want to welcome all the participants. We're glad you're here. And if you have any question or any comment, you can just type it on the chat box, and we will see it at the appropriate time. We'll respond to your questions. But if you have a question, you can put it on the chat box, and we will see it. Back to Kudzai. You would notice that one of the greatest challenges that startups would have or have been having in Africa is funding. A lot of guys with good ideas, but funding these ideas is another issue. Now, how do you think we can bridge this gap of financial inclusion, funding for startups, and how is this challenge impacting intra-Africa trade?
Yeah, that's a very, very challenging question. And I'll do my best to answer it on multiple levels because just like the previous question that you directed at Salvatore, it's got it's one of those things which really requires a lot of hands to come on board. But firstly, if we look at the issue of, say, funding is I think it's a big issue with entrepreneurs anyway, but more particularly, as you mentioned, in Africa, on the basis that you have very disjointed or underdeveloped entrepreneurial ecosystems. So, for example, I mentioned earlier during the introduction, I talked about the fact that the South African government has introduced innovation hubs or started these innovation hubs across the country. And the whole idea, or part of the ideas there, is to bring startups in, put them through a process, de-risk them as much as possible, and get them to a place where they're investment ready. So whilst we have a lot of smart, up and coming young entrepreneurs across the continent that have different ideas, one of the issues when it comes to funding is a lot of them are not what, if you look at it from an investment perspective, they're not investment ready. So they don't have the necessary training, or the startup hasn't developed to a place where an investor can come in and inject money, and then that startup could take off immediately. So that's one side of it. You have one group like that where the startup itself, or the companies that are, or the idea itself, whilst it has potential and merit, there still needs to be a lot of development that needs to happen. For example, is there a customer, or who are the potential customers for these potential products and services that this startup needs to offer? So that's one side. On the other hand, you also have, again, this is another area in which perhaps you need more of a private and public sector partnership to also ensure that funding is available for startups, um, particularly those that are perhaps not at a place where they're investment ready, but they just need that initial push, or in the form of a grant that can move them from point A to point B. It might not necessarily need to be quote unquote a cash infusion per se, but it could be provision of certain services. For example, um, there could be sponsorship packages that deal with maybe the marketing aspect, or the bookkeeping, accounting, all of these other functions and processes that the company requires. So it then really needs to be a creative approach, that sometimes it's not necessarily an issue of someone just needs cash, but it could be an issue of you just need a market, and then your customers then fund your development, or you just need certain services, or you need marketing expertise to help put out the product out there. So putting all of these things together would then require, like I mentioned, one of the things would be perhaps a private-public partnership, or new incubators that will focus primarily on trying to understand the different startups, the different companies that are coming up, and how they can be helped or assisted as much as possible. But and then get them to a place where either they're able to take on debt responsibly, or to get an investor to come in. So that's kind of maybe a general or generic answer to that part of the question, to that addresses the funding aspect. On the financial inclusion front and how it impacts on trade, particularly intra-Africa trade, you can't have effective financial or effective trade where you don't have effective or efficient movement of capital. So if I need to sell my goods, say in Nigeria, the question then becomes, how does someone who's in Nigeria then pay me for what I've produced, or for my goods, or for my services? So as long as the movement of capital is inefficient or expensive within the continent, of which it currently is, it hampers and inhibits intra-Africa trade to a very, very great deal, right? That's one. Two, for us to even start to talk about, okay, I've got a product or a service that I'm offering, coming back to that funding question that you introduced earlier, the startup itself, it needs, or a small business, or it could be an informal business even, it needs to be at a place where it can access credit, or financial services that can enable this business to function before we can even start to talk about offering these products and services. So for the better part, or if you look at Africa generally, we have about 43% of the African population being financially included, and the rest, it's a large section of the population that is unbanked or semi-banked in some way, more so now with the coming on board of mobile money and digital wallets and so on and so forth. But for the most part, Africa is largely unbanked as a continent. So when you then factor that in, if someone was to start a business today, all things being equal, it's very difficult to then fund that business, even if there's someone who's willing, if the person or this business doesn't have a bank account or is not somewhat plugged into the formal financial system, which then inhibits access to products like credit or even insurance for covering any, like even the current pandemic risks like those. You are exposed to those kind of risks, or if you're a farmer, climatic risks, etc., etc. So that is the bigger part of how financial inclusion is then, how it fits into this whole intra-Africa trade picture, in that efficient movement of goods and services requires the efficient move of capital. And for capital to move efficiently across the continent, there needs to be digital infrastructure, digital payment rails, or uniform policies with regards to how capital moves, exchange control regulations, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how I look at, or how I see how financial inclusion as well impacts on intra-Africa trade.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, looking at the inefficient movement of capital you talked about, you think that that the recent African free trade agreements can be of any help?
The free trade agreement, the way I see it, I see the movement of capital as essential to making the free trade agreement work, not necessarily the other way around. And let me explain why I say that. Because, for example, generically speaking, when we're talking about the free trade agreement, it means that Africa becomes one large and common market where we have removed a lot of these tariffs and barriers to trade, et cetera, et cetera. Now, for that to happen, there needs to be, firstly, investment in ensuring that uniformity, whether if we're saying, or standards across certain goods, certain services. Think of your foodstuffs or crops and whatever, right? Those types of things where there has to be agreed upon standards as to this is the right standard if we're looking at milk or whatever, or anything within that region. Now, the movement of capital, once you make it efficient, it then makes it possible for that free trade agreement, or for the purposes and vision of the free trade agreement, to be realized much quicker. Because now you have people that are enabled and to trade with each other. You now have the engine of trade being set properly, and you've removed a lot of these barriers, and it then becomes much easier and much more efficient for that capital to move within the continent. But the trade agreement in and of itself, it can also then push regulations, or within the specific countries, or regulators in specific the African countries, to then have a uniform platform, whether if you're looking at your financial services regulations, where they can be uniform across, the continent of Africa, which then removes some of those barriers to the movement of capital. So it's these things, they are very much intertwined, and I see that free trade agreement fostering innovation a great deal, considering as well the impact that COVID-19 has had on the continent, where it has become imperative to get the agreement going as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that's a critical point you made there, that an efficient movement of capital will actually enhance the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I think that's a point to note there. Now, going back to Salva 3, I don't know, do we have beta yet? Can somebody help me? Do you have beta yet? Not yet? Okay, so going back to you, Salva 3, one of the things he mentioned while Kutsai was making his point is that a number of the startups are not investment ready. And then if you bring that to our educational system, you realize that in our universities in Africa, we have a number of researchers in various subjects, various teams, various areas. But the issue is now translating these things from the university to the factory, moving it from the university to the companies. You will discover that we'll have a lot of researchers that are not being utilized. They are more or less useless because they are not being applied. So before I get to your next question, how do you think we can bridge this gap? So we don't just continue turning out papers that are not serving any purpose.
Yeah. Thanks again for this good question. And first, I have to, of course, admit that this is a problem that myself and my team we face every day. And first of all, I have to say the big challenge is this startup is like a new way of doing business for a lot of other people, because like a lot of business that they are existing for example back home in Tanzania, they are kind of like traditional business. So these are the businesses where our father, our grandfather, they just started off with probably less than $5,000, and they build up a business that they are probably big right now. But now when it comes back to the business that we're doing right now, they are tech-based business, and they require a lot of investment. And for example, if you have $5,000, then you can do much. It's just probably a couple of few things, and then no much progress. So this difference of business between the traditional business and this new way of doing business, I mean, this startup life, bring a lot of confusion, because like when you go and talk to these people who are already in the government, or they're the people who are in tax system or legal system, they don't even understand what we're telling them. For example, if you tell someone that I'm looking for $200,000 to scale my startup, he's looking at you like, are you out of your mind, or what's the problem? So there is this gap here, which I guess as well, it will take some time to teach them to understand what's the startup. Like, because even myself, one time I had like a very hot discussion with one of our incubators, because he was saying, you guys, you're here, you are not making any profit. And I was like, we're not expecting profit even in next 5 years. And he was like, hey, you're mad, you have to get out of this incubator then, because you are like not that serious. And then I gave him example of Uber have been in the industry for a couple of years, and they are making loss all the time, and investors, they keep pumping money in the startup. And he didn't understand. He was angry at me, and he was like thinking maybe I'm out of my mind and I don't know what I'm doing. So there is this lack of knowledge of like what is startup like and what it needs in terms of investment, in terms of like support, in terms of legal, in terms of tax, in terms of everything. So there is this lack of knowledge. And as you pointed out, we don't have right mentors that can give us help, because all the mentors, they're old school, and when it comes to mentoring, they don't really understand what's going on. And I have to agree again with the issue of investment readiness. That is the big problem, that a lot of startups, they are not ready. Even 2 years down the road after operation, they are not ready for that, because again, all these things, to be investment ready, you need to have a lot of first of all, like knowledge about what you have to have on table before investors can come and get to invest in your startup. And again, even the connection, even the network with the investors is another issue. And given that we still have no very strong startup ecosystem, for example, in Tanzania, they need to become even more harder to get invested. So um, I guess what we really need to do is to have some sort of like prepare these investors, I mean, these startup founders, to understand how to be strategic and to prepare themselves for to be investment ready as soon as possible, so that they can keep on surviving. Because according to my experience, again, what I see is a lot of startups, they end up dying after 2 years, because maybe you will have a passion for first year and second year, but after that, if you, for example, it's really hard to generate money this very early, like in 2 years. So a lot of founders, they end up giving up, because if you stay in the game for 2 years without getting money, then you lose the appetite. You have to go out there and probably get employed and get money. So I guess we need to bring in the practical experience, which is can be partly from research, which are researches that they're done by professors from universities, as well as corporate people, as well as having some sort of like the, I mean, the mentors that they can give these funders their experience on how they should be strategic enough to be able to attract investment. Because in Africa, it's even more harder to get invested, unless otherwise you have like very, very impressive idea. But otherwise, it's always very difficult for investors, first of all, to trust the African market and invest in your startup. So yeah, so I guess there is a gap there. I admit there is a gap, and the way forward will be, first of all, making sure that we match these funders to a lot of mentors and the real, I mean, the people who have like the founders of startups from elsewhere in the world, so that they can give them the experience on how they should prepare to be investment ready and to be able to scale their business across Africa and probably across the world.
Thank you very much. And I also think that we need to break the wall between our universities, our research institutes, and the real world. The war, there is this separation between the two worlds. The research institutions, the universities are doing their own thing, and the companies are doing their own thing. So I think that we need to bring the companies into the universities and bring the universities into the companies. And how do
Sure.
we do that? Yeah, we need to really begin to look at a situation where students begin to conduct researches that are relevant to companies, relevant to organizations, that can solve their problems. And so if these students, researchers come up with results that can solve practical company problems, those companies will fund those things. I think that almost every research result is a potential business.
Sure,
And
sure.
it's just for us to get funding and for us to have people who are in the business world finding these research results as solutions to their problems, and they will invest in it. So I think we need to do more between the theory and the practical, between the universities and the companies. And I think I am citing our panelists. Beta, you are welcome. We are glad to have you. You're welcome. And then we are getting to you right away. We're not giving you any space again. So we have been discussing a bit, and Kudzai mentioned about collaborations, about issues we might have with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And but he also stated that efficient movement of capital will help in the implementation. Um, I will want you to come in here. With respect to this African Continental Free Trade Agreement, how do you think that we can encourage collaborations among startups in Africa? Is the agreement going to help? Where are we now? Is the free trade agreement going to help? Is technology going to help? Where do we go from here? Your audio, we can't hear you. Can you check your audio? Check your microphone. No, we can't hear you. Maybe if you can check how you came in and be sure using your system. And while she sorts that out, you would, Salvatri, you would briefly come in again. What are the other challenges, the hardships that we experience in establishing business in other countries? Like you move from your country, you want to establish business in another country. What are the challenges in trade across Africa, and how can the free trade agreement help? What can we do?
Yeah. So once you're doing a business in your home country, it's slightly a little bit. It's much easier a little bit. But once you cross border to other places, then it become even more harder to comply with a lot of regulations and yeah. So for example, ourselves, we open in Kenya, and I remember I went to Kenya somewhere in February, early January, but the process of filing the company and everything was done just in August. So we took almost 8 months to get done. So there are a lot of procedures in between that, of course, they delayed the entire process. So I can say it takes so much time to get things done once you're moving across the countries. I don't know about other countries like South Africa or say Mozambique or Malawi or Nigeria, but for the experience that I had with Kenya, that was kind of like taking a bit of time, and a lot of challenges were around just like the process itself, like just opening up company. It takes so much time, as well as the payment issues. I mean, like just making sure that you integrate the payment infrastructure into like platform like Smart Class. It was taking so much time, and even up to now we just like chose the worst case scenario. I mean, like we just say, well, let's just have this payment infrastructure that will let people continue using the platform. But up to now we are still figuring out how we can have infrastructure that can allow the flow of capital, or I mean of payment from one place to another without any issues. So as mentioned earlier by other discussant, I guess one of the main problem that I guess African startups and African business people we need to solve is also being able to develop payment infrastructure that works across Africa. Because the issue is, you find like in Tanzania you can send money via mobile payments, but those mobile payments, they cannot go beyond certain infrastructure. So when you go to another place, those infrastructure, they don't work, compared to like if I'm in Sydney, I can buy something in New York very easily by just clicking few buttons on my computer. So I guess Africa, we also need to have such infrastructures that will allow us to be able to transact across the Africa without any hardship. And I guess this will be maybe the first thing that we'll have to do before, I mean, in this free trade agreement, because uh, if we're using technology, this should not be hard to be able to develop infrastructure that can help someone in Nigeria to buy, say, pineapple from Cape Town, or someone in Dar es Salaam to buy, say, jollof from Nigeria. So we should be able to develop this payment infrastructure that cut across Africa. And if we have such an infrastructure, I guess it will be very easy for a lot of startups to scale across Africa, because currently it's really a chaos to just scale. Because like we plan to go to Uganda, but when I was thinking about payment infrastructure again, it will take years and years, and they need a lot of like documentations. And if you are not a local, then it becomes even more harder to complete the process. So I guess one of the potential area that as Africa we need to fix is how can we have an integrated payment systems that can allow people to pay across Africa, maybe via this mobile money comfortably without any hassle. Yeah, so that's the thing that I guess if we can sort, then our startup can go anywhere, because our infrastructure allows us to be anywhere. But because of those issues, then it becomes very hard to get some customers, because a lot of customers across Africa, they're using mobile money payments. So if you just have only let's say MasterCard or credit card payments, then you are just targeting very few. And I guess those are the among the reasons that make investors not um, have appetite to invest in African startup, because when they think of the idea of scaling, it seems like close to impossible. And yeah, that's why it takes so much work to convince investors to invest in a lot of these African startup. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have Better back. Is Better with us now? If you can unmute
Yes,
yourself.
I am back. Kindly
Great.
confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you clearly. And
Perfect.
now that your audio is up, you can now click on your video so that we can see your face too, if you don't mind. Okay, so we have this for you. I hope she didn't leave. Okay, yes, okay.
No, I'm still here.
Very well, very well. We can see you now. Now, Salvatore just finished talking about the hardships that relates to establishing businesses in other African countries. If you want to move from your country to another country to establish business, he mentioned some of the difficulties. And I think that part of the issues we also have among African startups is that a lot of people, a lot of us, we want to own the businesses alone. It's mine, and for me, and for my family. And then with that, we experienced a lot of limitations. Can you come in and tell us how we can come up this and encourage more of collaborations among African startups?
Okay. Thank you so much, IK. And such a pleasure being here. So my name is Pesa Sitole. I'm an entrepreneur in the Kingdom of Eswatini. I run a startup business in marketing. So we're a marketing and PR agency called Kwanza Dreams, and another one called Kwanza Deliveries, where we are solving a problem. We're empowering local farmers and providing food security for a rural area in my area where I currently stay. So we are using bicycles to move around the community. So now, just before I get to answering your question, just a little background on this business, the Kwanza Delivery business. What I realized is that my community has a problem. They have farms and they are farming, which means they have produce. But then some of these things rot at their farms because no one is there to buy from them. And if they do buy, they're getting ripped off by middlemen. So I'm solving that problem. And through doing that, I realized that this is also a common problem, not only in Swaziland, but also in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in some of the SADC countries. How do I know this? through what we call collaborations. When you are networking, when you are talking with people, you get to understand their problems or where they're coming from. And that's how collaborations can come about. So we need to just forget about being selfish if we want to see our own business to thrive, just before we can see our communities and our countries thrive as well. So we need to be open as individuals to say, you know what, for my business to grow, can I collaborate with somebody else within my community, within my country, and also from outside the country? Now, why is collaboration important? It's important because we cannot lie. It's hard to get resources to start a business, to scale, to grow, and also just simple as launching it. So, and you also need expertise as well. So collaboration shouldn't just only be about money, but it can also be just sharing information. Tell me what's happening in Nigeria. How can I take what's happening in Nigeria and apply it in Eswatini? What is it that we need to change? Because we understand population, comparing Eswatini with Nigeria is quite different. But there are things that I can do through collaborations with someone in Nigeria, someone in Tanzania, and we can even start businesses and branches if we can just collaborate. And this also can involve our leaders in our communities, in our countries. In 2011, in the USA, I'm going to quote Barack Obama. So Barack Obama made a speech in 2011, and he said, entrepreneurs embody the promise in America. The idea that you have a good idea and are willing to work hard and see it through, you can succeed in this country. And in fulfilling this promise, entrepreneurs also play a critical role in expanding our economy and creating jobs. And you know what happened after that speech? Startups were mushrooming everywhere. People were starting to believe in their own ideas. They were starting to believe in coming together to start businesses because their leader told them that it's possible. Their leader gave them faith. So if our own leaders in Africa could recognize that entrepreneurs have a role in any economy, then we can be able, as it's either you are a young person or you're just an older person starting a business, you have faith within yourself. And if you do that, and another country also has that particular leader who empowers them, who recognizes the effort that they can make, these countries can collaborate from government level. So this is just not about us as individuals, but also government needs to come in. Big enterprises need to come in and chip in with SMEs. I can make an example with Standard Bank. You've got your MTNs. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they started recognizing small businesses because now they know that small businesses need help. So they have campaigns, it's their marketing campaigns, but it is helping entrepreneurs, it is helping businesses, and it is helping them, giving exposure to all other African countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that insight on collaboration. You know, I have this saying that I like, you know, that the new competition is collaboration. Yes. And I have come to understand that there is no problem that partnership cannot solve. So, and as much as we need government collaborations, which they are trying their best to do, I think that these startups, these entrepreneurs, and people like us actually need to collaborate across the continent, and it will help us both in sharing knowledge, sharing ideas, like you mentioned, and in overcoming some of the common issues, common problems that we have. So thank you very much on that. I'll go back to Kudzai. If you're there, briefly, if you can tell us other ways you think that the barriers in intra-African trade can be broken. In what other way can we break these barriers?
One of the other ways that intra-African or barriers to intra-African trade can be broken, which is very, very critical, again, in my opinion, to making the agreement really work, would be investment in power production, right? So just to throw a few numbers out there, South Africa has a population of approximately 58 million people, and electricity production is about 51,000 megawatts annually, approximately. cross that with Nigeria, which has approximately 200 million people and 4,500 megawatts approximately of power production or from electricity. The numbers, or those particular numbers, they tell a very big picture or a very big story as to where Africa is in terms of developing a very robust industrial sector or a manufacturing sector, because all of these things, for them to then mushroom and come up, they require a large or reliable sources of power, reliable electricity, and that will then enable, even if we're talking earlier, we're talking about connectivity, but what good is connectivity where you cannot even power, whether it's your cell phones or the cell towers, and so on and so forth. And you also need, like I was talking about, manufacturing and all of this, that having reliable power becomes very critical to having a robust world-class manufacturing sector, and that also spills across to other sectors. So I think that this is an area that really, really, really needs to be looked at, to where Africa, we have across the continent, you have issues about, electricity production, inconsistent supply, all of that. One of the ways that I look at it is, obviously as an entrepreneur, I kind of see problems as an opportunity. So with to this specific issue, I also look at it as an opportunity for entrepreneurs to then come up with innovative ideas or innovative ways of generating power, or companies that can look at other sources of generating power, so that as much as possible, perhaps we can develop smart grids. Obviously, this would require, or it will need to be done within a certain regulatory framework across the different countries. But if there's one thing we can all agree on, is that as a start, that power is necessary, electricity is necessary to foster innovation, to make that trade or this agreement work. There has to be, the ability to power our businesses, power our manufacturing sectors, and a whole lot of other issues. That way, even things like what we're talking about, education, a lot of people in the rural areas, this becomes an issue that inhibits their learning, because, for example, most of the time, or once the sun sets, they have to switch over to candlelight and all of these other things in other parts of the continent. So the lack of consistent power supply is an area where, as entrepreneurs, we can come in and start to bring in solutions, build sustainable power generating solutions, renewable solutions, in addition to complement the existing infrastructure, or to reimagine what already exists in terms of the infrastructure that's used for generating power. So that's kind of another thing that I see, in addition to just financial inclusion or the digital infrastructure, that would be critical in making this agreement a success.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, power is critical. And like the statistics you gave, in Nigeria, it is one of the most critical infrastructure we need. The population is up there, but the power generation is down here. And like you said, I think it's every problem is an opportunity. I think that startups, innovators, young entrepreneurs need to start looking in that direction. We have a lot of sun, like in Nigeria, we have a lot of sun. So things like solar energy is supposed to help us here. And then we generate a lot of waste in Africa. And these things can be turned not just to wealth, but to power, biodegradable stuff that can be turned to power generating plants. And it is very, very critical. while we are looking at this, a number of us are involved in social activities. Just like we have startups that are businesses, we also have social entrepreneurs. And what we have seen in Africa is that most times we depend on grants, either from foreign countries, or we're looking for companies to sponsor our programs, or we're looking for individuals to sponsor. But there are a lot of problems in Africa that require social intervention. And so having multiplicity of social groups and social organizations, it's actually important. The sustainability of these groups is another issue. I'm getting back to you now, Better. You are involved in a lot of things. If you can hear me better, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, you are involved in a lot of social activities. You are, apart from fact, the director of a startup, Grind in Bane, and startup Grind Eswatini, with focus on nurturing startup ecosystems through events, workshops, media, partnerships. You are also facilitating workshops and conversations in entrepreneurship, employment, out of school youth. And these are all social things, women in business and all that. Are we going to continue to depend on grants, especially these grants that come from foreigners, foreign aids? How can we make our social enterprises sustainable? How do we help in solving the numerous problems we have in Africa, and we are still able as organizations to make money to sustain these organizations?
Oh, yeah. I wish I had an answer to that question. But what I'm going to say is yes, when I was preparing for this presentation, I actually did think about how is it that we can stop relying on grants, we can stop relying on donations. I must say, though, that in capital towns in our African countries, they do have access to funding because they've got access to internet, right? They've got access to technology. Now, my key problem is we have a lot of social issues in the rural areas. That is where technology isn't there. One of my fellow colleagues right now just mentioned the issue of electricity. How is it, or who is going to help those people in the rural areas who have brilliant ideas on how to solve their own societal issues? But how are we going to do it without really getting donations or grants? The answer to that is collaboration. How do we start having our own banks, having our own funds, having our own investor funds where we can then tap into that to help or start businesses outside of towns into the rural areas where people, sometimes they do even have the money. It's just that they do not have the infrastructure, or that the spaces are not really easy to work in. I'm not sure if you get my point there. The rural areas need attention. And for us to solve those issues outside of just accepting donations, we need to collaborate as entrepreneurs. We need to find, fund, and partner with people in the rural areas who want to go into entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So you are still going back to the importance of collaboration. Collaboration.
Yes. I believe in collaboration. That is the only solution that we have right now.
And collaboration. Wow, that is great. That is great. Now, looking at this, we have been looking at what we can do as individuals, as businesses, as startups, as innovators. Where does the government come in here? What is our recommendation for governments? How would they help? How can they help these innovators? How can they help these startups? How can they collaborate with private sectors, with the universities to ensure that our startups get to where they should be? I'm getting back to you, Salvatri. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I would say government is very powerful. I mean, government is very powerful. And if it can use that power to push startup, yeah, we're gonna succeed. Because, for example, I remember earlier this year, there is a startup which was acquired um, at $25 million back home in Tanzania, right? So, and that means a lot to the country and to the startup ecosystem, and that brings a lot of money to the country. So, so if government really build up the strong ecosystem that will attract both local and international investors to come in and to support the startup, then the startup will start picking up and prosper. Because the main challenge currently, for example, in Tanzania, is one is from legal perspective. For example, we really need some grace period for a lot of startups, because like if I like you're a startup and then you're treated like other big companies in the country, so you have to pay tax, you have to have offices, you must have this and that, which is really hard for the startups. So at least the government should at least put separate, I mean a clear separation between the startups and big companies, in a way that the startup maybe can be given some sort of favors for some time to probably pay no tax, right? That's one. Two, of course, the government right now is doing a good job by having a couple of incubator services in Tanzania, but still, this incubator, they're not strong enough in terms of giving the startup, first of all, the right skills that they need. For example, being investment ready, being able to do proper aggressive marketing, be able to uh, perfect their idea. And yeah, so this incubator should be equipped with expertise, as well as they should be able at least to give some sort of like seed fund that can help the startup to at least test the idea. Because you feel like they are startup with very brilliant idea, but they don't have even say $2,000 to try out marketing. So if this incubator, they can be coupled with some sort of funding support to help the startup, then that would be a great deal. And another way that government can do, as I said earlier, that government is powerful by just saying or by just talking to some key and well uh, known businessmen and women in Tanzania, then these people, they can come together and put aside. Because like one day I was just thinking of, if these guys, they come together and just put down let's say 1 million US dollar every year for 10 startups in Tanzania, then that's a lot of money. Because a lot of these startups, they need just $100,000 to just scale and reach to the highest. So if government can at least establish some sort of like a funding support that is backed by the existing investors and developed business people, then yeah, and even government itself, it can fund, and they annually they just support 10 startups. Because imagine if one startup was acquired at 25 million dollar, then if you have 10 startup acquired at that rate, then you're talking about millions of money. And this is how we're going to bring investor confidence, because investor, they want to be sure of what they're doing. So in order for them to invest in a country, they should see that there is something happening. So this is one way that we can bring in the confidence from international investors. And again, I think the government should really understand what is going on around the world in terms of technology. Because you can see everybody in the world is investing in technology, like China, US, Britain. Everybody is investing a lot in technology. And these startups from across the world, I mean, from China, from US, they're coming in Africa. They're taking everything there. They're taking data. They're taking money. Like Uber, you just pay Uber right now, and the money goes to New York. So we're losing a lot of money. So it's time that the government gets serious in terms of, first of all, setting rules that will be protecting the local startups, at the same time making sure that we don't lose a lot in terms of data, as well as the revenue that go out of Africa. So that is another space that the government should look at. But the last part that I want to contribute is uh, government. Okay, some of the private companies in Tanzania, like Vodacom, they have seen the potential of startups, and they have started their program, which is called Vodacom Accelerator Program, that will be funding, putting up to 150, 150, $100,000 every year to three startups that they believe that they have a bright future. And this year they have started with three startups, and Smart Class is one of them. So we are happy to acknowledge that the collaboration that Martha has been talking here, we are already into it, and we hope that will bring, first of all, that is giving us energy and is giving us expertise as well as resources that we don't have, so that we can be able to achieve our vision of changing the way people learn and teach across the continent. So on to finalize this, I can say government as well can keep on negotiating with more players, especially big corporates, more importantly, banks as well as telcos, to set up some funding or programs that will be supporting some of the emerging startups, and then help them to realize their vision, while at the same time solving the most pressing problems in Tanzania and eventually across Africa and to the world.
Thank you very much for that response. And one of the critical things you mentioned is the need for rules, for a legal system that will protect our startups, that will protect our ideas, that will protect our innovations, that will protect our small businesses. Because we have situations where even when we have the funds coming, in a little while, these fund providers take over the businesses and run our people out of the business they started, because there are no sufficient legal provisions to protect them. And sometimes we also realize that maybe we rush into those deals because they are bringing money, and we don't take care of the agreements, issues in the agreements to protect our businesses. So it's important to look at this, that the government comes up with rules that will protect innovators and startups. Back to Kudzai, how do you think government can come in?
Right. The role of government, the way I see it, is perhaps twofold. Firstly, from a regulatory perspective, where, because government in most of these things is the one responsible for setting the rules, the regulations, and even setting the tone for the operating environment, whether it's via taxes or direct regulations, you name it. So I see the role of government as, firstly, like the regulatory perspective, where there need to be a reduction in red tape, right? Like Salvatore was mentioning earlier, how many hoops he had to jump through to register a company, and like when he went over to Kenya, and then the integrations and so on and so forth, it became a problem. So there is a lot of that red tape that comes across, or that is part and parcel of regulations, where some of these regulations were written or put in place during a time where we didn't have so much digital connectivity, where we didn't have so many, or things were not as digital as they are today. So a lot of these current regulations perhaps need to be reviewed. And once they have been reviewed, perhaps some of them can be rolled back to allow a lot of other up and coming startup companies to then come into the play. As an example I can give you, it would be in the financial services space, where if you wanted to get a banking license, or a license that would allow you to move and transfer money in most countries. It's very difficult. You need millions and millions of dollars to do that, despite the fact that we now have technologies that have lowered the risk of defaults or lowered the risk of fraud and all of that. Now, I'm not trying to say that government needs to be irresponsible and just make it an open season for anyone and everyone who wants to. But if there is a case to be made for certain financial services, certain products that have been in the past overly regulated, perhaps it's time to have a look at those things and roll back some of that regulation, or maybe come up with sandboxes, right? Where, for example, coming back to that banking example, where, say, the central bank would have like an innovation hub or an incubator of sorts, where certain companies that are trying to tackle um, problems within the financial services space can get partial licensing as their market grows. So, for example, they will pay for a certain license, which will allow them to only service 1,000 or 2,000 customers. Once they are about to scale beyond that, then that license is upgraded and so on and so forth, up until they're now at a place where they are fully licensed to conduct business across the country without much inhibition. So these are some of the things that, or some of the areas in which government can actually play a very crucial role in terms of fostering that innovation and encouraging it. I mentioned taxation as well. That again, that's also something that needs to be looked at, particularly when you're looking at a startup or within the startup ecosystem. The tax regimes across the continent obviously differ, but at the same time, that consideration needs to be made, that at what point does a company start to pay taxes and what percentage of their revenue is going to be taxed and so on and so forth. The other role that I would see government playing would be perhaps, again, in bridging the divide or in infrastructure investment. We talked about electricity and perhaps even things like roads or these innovation hubs, where in the rural areas you have people that are entrepreneurial that want to solve their own problems, but the infrastructure that will allow them to do that, or the tools necessary to do that, may not be available. And in those areas and under certain auspices, those are the things that would need to be looked at from more of a governmental perspective, to say, how can we then assist people in these areas, in these conditions, to also start to come up with ideas and start to bring these companies online that can become huge players within the market across the board. So finally, the other role that that I see government playing would be perhaps in the education space, making sure that the education policy or education that people get prepares them adequately for entrepreneurship and encouraging entrepreneurship within the curriculum. Because for the most part, from my own experiences, having traveled to different countries across the continent, entrepreneurship is not really something that from the experience that I've had, it's not really part of the core curriculum of most schools. Of course, that is changing now, but I think more can be done in that regard or on that front, so that, even from an early age, kids get that encouragement, they get the right tools, the right training to also see entrepreneurship as an alternative. That, look, you can also be an employer, you can also start something, a company that can also get big. You also mentioned earlier when you were talking about reliance on donors, foreign donors, and these grants. I think that's where it starts to curb that mentality of over-reliance on foreign donors and on these grants, to where once a person has been empowered, or the message from early on has been, you can do it, this is what's possible, and the necessary tools and training is given, I think over time that the ecosystem of innovation in Africa will begin to change to really match the potential that the continent has. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that submission. And every one of us will have a part in this government issue. So let's get back to Beta. If Beta is on, you can hear me. Beta, are you there? Beta, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Now, we're talking about how the government can come in. Do you think that the disposition of our governments in Africa, do you think their dispositions have affected innovations and startups? The effects, are they positive, negative, or what? And then what are your recommendations?
Okay, sorry, you are breaking up. So if you could repeat the question.
I'm asking if government disposition, the kind of governments we run, the kind of leadership we have in Africa, the kind of systems, government systems we have, do they have impact on innovations and startups? These impacts, are they positive or negative? And what are your recommendations?
Okay, I hope I'm hearing your question correctly because you keep breaking up a bit, hence I switched off my camera. I think that our government structures and policies actually cripple entrepreneurs because some of them are still, the people.
Oh.
Hello, are you there?
The people in government themselves are still old people who still believe in the old structures. That was when entrepreneurs were still called businessmen and businesswomen. And what they used to do was just start a business and that was all they would do. And if the owner of that particular business dies, no one else is there to scale it. No one else is there to keep sustaining that particular business. So that is where we're coming from now, to say we are entrepreneurs. They are entrepreneurs. They want to start businesses, but then all these policies that are in place are crippling or they're slowing down the process. So I do believe that with lower interest rates, with clear and much friendlier policies, we could be able to scale. We could be able to have a conducive space to start entrepreneurship businesses and startups. When I was starting my conversation, I mentioned the speech that Barack Obama made. This particular belief from a leader can make a country, can make a state believe they could do anything that they want to do. So it all starts with the leader and it ends with the leader. So in as much as we are trying, yes, we are trying and their opportunities are there, there is that gap that is missing in terms of support from country leaders to say, here we are a ministry, or are we the senior government, we want to help you, we want even just recognition, because I believe in personal development. The person needs to believe in something for them to be able to do more. So yes, I think government has a huge role in shaping how entrepreneurship will be in the future. And I am hoping that it changes. We can see now that younger people are getting in government positions, and you can see a lot of Mandela Washington fellows actually doing a lot in their own countries. So yeah, it is going to change gradually and as low as it is, but I do believe that the future in entrepreneurship is quite bright. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And while we prepare to wrap up, well, for the participants, if you have any questions, like we said before, you can send your questions, you can direct it to any of the panelists, You can also decide to ask a general question, which we can direct to any of them to answer. But while we are waiting for that, I will keep doing the asking. However, we are rounding off in a couple of minutes. Now, talking about this government, a couple of issues came up. And Salvatore mentioned the issue that rules need to be made by governments to protect innovators and startups. And that's very, very important. Kudzai made the point that regulations by governments should not constitute problems. Regulations by governments should be made to protect innovators, encourage innovation, and not to become a stumbling block for those who are making efforts to make their contribution. You mentioned infrastructure, and you mentioned the educational space, the need for our curriculum to encourage entrepreneurship, the need for us to have actually functional education. And then Betta mentioned the issue of low interest rate, which is very key. Like in Nigeria, it's just now that we're beginning to get some loans that the interest rate is 1 digit. Before now, the loans we used to hear about and know about 20-something percent, 19%, 30-something percent. And that will stifle businesses, that will stifle startups. There's no startup that will make it with that. But there's a need for the government to be deliberate about funding startups and then reducing the interest rate. We are not talking about grants, but even when these are loans, when the interest rates are low, very low, like 3%. Like sometime I was in the UK and we got to a farm where the man was using cow dung to produce electricity. And he uses the electricity for his farm and then sells the balance to the national grid. And then I asked him a question, how did you start? He said he got a loan from the government. At what rate? He said 3%. For how many years? Over 25 years. If you have such opportunities in Africa, businesses will do well. Startups will pick up. Innovations will be turned into businesses and all that. So we need the government to step up and do more. But instead of just talking government and government and government, the question is, who is this government? Who is the government? And that is where I think that young people like us should step up our game. We need to start getting involved in leadership, in political leadership in particular. Political leadership in particular. Because one decision by a political leader can crumble the entire business in the whole country. Just one wrong decision. One wrong decision by a political leader can lead a country to war. One wrong decision by a political leader can lead to economic problems. And so, she mentioned, Betta mentioned, that we have a lot of old people in government running with the old ideas. And then a lot of young people are either sitting on the fence or facing their business, or they are not interested in what is going on. So I think that we need to step up and begin to look at government position, contesting elections, getting appointed into positions, serving in political offices. If you are not the one in power as the governor, as the president, or as the senator, or as the legislator, you can be the advisor. You can get involved in his campaign so that when he gets there, he appoints you as advisor. There are a lot of things you can do. Having, with the kind of things that we are already doing as private people, look at our panelists and their great profile. If you find yourself in government tomorrow, Salvatore, I have no doubt that the educational system will be well positioned. And that's the point we are making.
Yeah, sure.
The same thing applies to Kudzai, the same thing applies to Betta in our various areas. So it's important that we do not look away from political leadership. Youths in Africa need to take it seriously. This issue of voter apathy, we don't get involved in politics, we don't get involved in campaigns, we don't run elections. Yes, some people say there is rigging, that they don't allow the real owner to win. But how do we find out if we don't try? And then we have the critical mass, we have the population in Africa to push for the change we want. The youth in Africa, that is actually the major resources we have, the youthful age. And if we collaborate and pool that youthful resources together, and engage our systems, they can only resist for a moment. If we keep pushing, we will get there. And it is on that note that I will call on all the panelists just in 1 minute to give us your last thought, your concluding thought on our discussion today. And then this time around, I will start with, I'm not starting with Salvatore now, since we started with you.
No worries.
I hope we still have Kuzai. Is he still with us?
I'm here, 100%.
Please, your concluding thought.
Okay. My concluding thoughts would be to actually say that we have the opportunity to make this continent as great as we want it to be. There are problems, yes. There are obstacles. There are different environments in which we're operating in. We have talked about some of the challenges here, and you are also talking about even the opportunity or the logic behind actually running or participating in the governance of things, whether it's at a provincial level, local government level, or national level, because now it's as a way of trying to influence or make sure that the right decisions will be made that, long term could make Africa a better continent. But at the same time, like I'm saying, there are a lot of challenges, a lot of issues in Africa, and we just have to start to see ourselves as the solutions and to start where we are with what we have, and then encourage and inspire others to join us on this journey. Because this is not something that one person can do alone, or whether myself or any of the panelists or any of the participants. It'll take a collective effort in our own way, in our own corners, but ultimately striving for the same vision. Like one of my favorite quotes, which says that Rome was not built in one day, but every day they were laying bricks. So this is kind of how I look at, as in conclusion, that let's build the solutions that we need to make Africa better, make Africa bigger, make Africa the place that we envision it to be. The solution is up to each and every one of us has the answer to actually do that. And we just need to take collective responsibility and individual responsibility in spite of the many challenges that might exist. That would be those are my concluding thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you for your incisive and resourceful submissions from the beginning of this discussion. We'll get to you now, Salvatore. Your concluding thoughts.
Yeah, thanks again for this opportunity, and thanks for impressive contribution from everybody. Yeah, so to sum up, I think Africa, we should take technology with all our hearts, our brains, and our two hands, and take it forward. Because I think Africa is one of the continent which is lagging behind in terms of technology, but at the same time, it's the continent that needs technology more than other continents. And I think we have to take this opportunity to develop our technology so that we can catch up with the rest of the world much quicker. Because what I see is maybe the hassles that other continent took to get where they are, we are not going to take that much hassle if we'll be able to embrace technology. For example, the money that a lot of other countries spent in building schools and institutions, probably in Africa, we can skip that by leveraging on remote learning and still achieve a much bigger impact. So I think it's high time for individuals, first of all, because individuals, I guess we have more power and more flexibility in developing these technological solutions to the African problems. And then we set excellent examples that will inspire others across the continent, as well as they will shock the government, like, hey, what are these guys doing? And then they come in and they give you support. So I think individual will have bigger room to like start inspiring and trying to show that it's possible, and then other people will follow, especially the government as well as the private sector. And for now, at least I can see like the private sector has already seen the light in space of startup ecosystem, and they're coming in and they're supporting these startups. So yeah, so in summary, what I can say, Africa should we should really take this age of technology with all of our hearts, and make sure that we leverage on it, and it give us the development that we have been looking for years. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your contributions. Thank you. Let's hear from Beta, your concluding thoughts.
Thank you. Now, in conclusion, I would like to say that let us create our own African story. I think it is time for us to see our own social challenges and to fix our social challenges in an African way. Not to say that we cannot incorporate what we can take from outside of Africa, but let us solve them in such a way that they benefit the African people or people living in those spaces. Imagine how Africa would be if our leaders believed in entrepreneurs, if corporates supported entrepreneurs, if there was a pool of money that is going to be able to help start businesses. I mean, just imagine that Africa. Imagine Africa where we are able to collaborate with one another. We are able to work together where there is no crime, where there isn't any corruption when it comes to entrepreneurship. I mean, I believe that Africa will be a beautiful Africa. And I believe entrepreneurs need to be able to start, create, build, and sustain. And in closing, I would like to say that let us all begin with the end in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to appreciate Mozambique Academy of Research and Sustainable Development for putting this together and for having all of us on board. I also want to appreciate the leader, Eduardo. Eduardo is actually currently a DPhil candidate in economics at the Federal University of Minas. And Eduardo has consulted for the Ministry of Education, the World Bank, volunteered with the local organizing committee for the 10th All African Games in Maputo. Eduardo is an alumnus of the African Program on Rethinking Development Economics funded by South African government, and he is also a Mandela Washington Fellow. Meanwhile, all the panelists, including myself, we're all Mandela Washington Fellow, and it's great to hear that we all do great things. At this end, my name is Ikechukwu Agbo. I'm a legal practitioner. I also work with the Nigerian Senate as a senior legislative aide. I am the executive director of Responsibility Initiative, and Responsibility Initiative is a non-profit that focuses on empowering young entrepreneurs, promoting community responsibility, and raising servant leaders. And just like Kutza briefly pointed out, we advocate taking responsibility for our immediate environments, for our communities, and not just waiting for the government. We believe that if we all play our parts in our various ends, together we will develop Africa. So we encourage African youth, young men and women, the teeming population we have, to take responsibility for Africa. It is not time for blame game. We must do away with the blame game. It is time for every one of us to take responsibility, like Mozambique Academy is doing through the efforts of Eduardo, and each of these panelists are doing. Let's take responsibility for our immediate environments, for our communities, for our countries, and together let's take responsibility for Africa. And in our lifetime, we will see the Africa of our dream. I want to thank all the participants for making our time to join us. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless Africa. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Lisa.